Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube video on the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, as well as being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave a rating, like, follow, subscribe, and review depending on the platform you're listening to if you want to help support the podcast and keep us going. Today, I'm back with my co-host Mark, and we're going to be talking about the core TCG regional and our experience with it, as long as what that regional means, as well as the European Raid and Trade regional, and its impact on the meta and kind of just where the meta is overall. So I don't necessarily have a question of the week exactly prepared, but I guess if I had to kind of create one on the fly, I would say, what do you currently think of the BT15 meta and its overall health? I know we're just at the beginning of it, we're still getting a whole bunch of results and data from it, but based on a player's experience with BT15, I'm curious to see where your thoughts are with it. So that should be a good segue into, well, our experience with the core TCG regional. So before we get into the data, I kind of just want to talk about our experiences with the meta first, after playing basically one of the more competitive events that we could with the format. So, Mark, I know you took Machine Dramon to regionals, and I took Gaomon to regionals, or Mirage. So, to kind of set an example, I didn't exactly do as well as I wanted. I got 55th place out of, what was it, 336? Yeah, 336. And that's not bad. It's not exactly where I wanted. I went X and 3. So, to kind of give my breakdown, I already kind of posted the breakdown on Facebook, but I could bring that post up here just so everyone can kind of see the deck list and see what I was kind of cooking with. So give me a second to bring that up. So basically, I took Mirage. I didn't really change the deck a whole lot compared to when I played it last, which I think was Ultimate Cup. And I think Mirage is still a really decent deck for the format, because he does have a lot of really solid answers for what the format is going to be throwing at him. So round one, I was facing against Bloomlord. I ended up winning that because, I OTK them and bounce control on top of taxing for drawing. It really just kind of makes Bloomlord move a little bit slower. There was a really awkward game where we both kind of just weren't really playing at full steam, so I was like, not really rookie rushing him, but I was like champion rushing him. And that was kind of like bizarre because he was bricking and I was champion rush, so that was weird. Then round two was Leomon. Leomon is almost a free matchup as long as you don't brick. Just because Fortitude requires the Digimon to be deleted, and I'm not deleting anything, so they almost never get Fortitude, and I just bounce their main stack, and they can't play the game from that point forward. So that's kind of just how Leomon loses. That's as long as, again, I get into my Mirage, I'm able to bounce their Digimon, Digivolve from Burst Mode if I don't kill them into the Mirage, and then that just taxes them out of the game. Then round three was against a Melga deck. So this is kind of just a really interesting back and forth because we're trying to do the same thing. It's just, I feel like I can take advantage of the fact that they naturally want to draw again, kind of just punishing them for their game plan. Sure, they have better battle protection, but it takes them longer to get going because they need to see more pieces versus me. Then after that round, I had a deck check. So that kind of sucked because going into my round 5, it caused me to have a bricky hand. So I ended up losing to Leomon, which is, like I said, normally a free matchup as long as you don't brick. But I bricked because of that deck check. I probably just didn't shuffle good enough, and that was my fault. Skill issue on shuffling, I guess. Then round 5 was a Leviamon. So that was, it seems like it's a hard matchup, and it kind of was the way they were playing Leviamon, because they almost played it like an OTK deck and taking a lot of pages from what Anubis was doing. So he basically just like comboed me into an OTK position that I didn't exactly know existed by like turn 2 on one of the games, and then the other game we were just trading boosts and trainings, and then he just comboed off before I did, and I was like, well, that was stupid. Very fun and interactive game. And by that, I am being 110% facetious. It was probably one of the most miserable games I played because I got killed turn 2 and I couldn't do anything about that. It literally was like 3 minutes. I was blown away. Then round 6, I was able to win against Wargray. That matchup isn't as bad as it used to be just because Zudo Ace puts in a lot of heavy lifting to strip this like the protection, and then I just bounce it like everything else, and then the deck kind of just does the same thing like Leomon. It just crumbles after you strip away the protection. Then round 7 was against another Leviamon, and I ended up winning against that Leviamon just because they weren't trying to OTK me, so they were leaving stuff on the field, and I was just bouncing and controlling them rather efficiently. Their removal didn't exactly come up, so it didn't matter if they didn't see it because they never used it. And I was just literally able to just steamroll because they didn't have the removal and they had borderline no setup, and I was like messing with their game plan. Then round 8 was the last round. I faced off against Yellow Vaccines. This was probably one of the most, if not the most important match of the tournament, because if I had won, there was a chance I could have been in top 16, because the player that I lost to was the top 16 Yellow Vaccine player. And that was a very intense game because it was just a lot of solid back and forth. And he had some really interesting tech cards that I exactly wasn't expecting or counting on. So they, just for the record, I'm just going to bring up their list real quick. I thought I did. No. Like, I'm not going to go over their list, but it is worth mentioning at the very least because their list was very interesting. I will have to say, against this matchup, my removal option Full Metal Blaze put in a lot of work. Game 1, he had like a Mitamamon and a full field of like Digimon, and I was able to basically wipe the field because of Full Metal Blaze. So removal options are good. Spoiler alert. And then he was basically mostly on just level 5 control. Like, his level 3s were just there to get him to his level 4s. And then he just tried to stay on his level 4s and aced when needed to. Or he just hard played the ace to try to out my board because he was using the purple Kari to be able to basically make like Angelwamon ace free. So it's just like, yeah, this is a free minus 6k. And then I'm going to play another one, and then there's another minus 6k, or he's going to play the Magna Angemon, recover, and then minus whatever to kill my bodies for, like, really cheap. And I was blown away on what it could do. And then Mitamamon and Venusmon are just there to stall, and Mitamamon giving the Digimon Rush allows them to be able to push for games. And the only way I actually lost that matchup because I didn't know exactly what to do for that matchup the first time I was playing into it, outside of just obviously bounce the aces and then get memory off of Overflow and win because of Overflow. But once he got a rhythm going, it was actually really hard and very annoying to play against, which I guess is to the deck's strengths. And that's where like Venusmon comes in for the shutdown, so that way you could try to aggress as the Yellow Vaccine player, and then Mitamamon also lets you aggress because you just throw out a free body with Rush, and ideally it's going to be either Rapidmon or Angemon, because they have abilities, well, Angemon, when you suspend him because of your attacking with him, then you get to use him for potential removal or just damage, and his on-delete ability, if he does die, allows you to just basically get a free recovery, and then Rapidmon just, suspend minus 4k, easy peasy. And the fact that it also affects security is like insane. And they were hardcore on Revelation of Light to be able to just slow my field down, except because I was a one stack deck, it really didn't slow my field down. And again, I'm going to upload the gameplay later, but the Mitamamon uh taking Revelation of Light out of security is what actually ended up making me lose, because he had a Patamon in Raising, moved it out, shuffled his security, which shuffled the Revelation of Light, which put it on the top. Otherwise, I was going to 100% win and cream this deck. But good game, good player overall. Just a shame that I barely missed out on top 16 because of RNG. So that's kind of my run. I know that was a little bit lengthy of like an explanation on it all. In terms of like my deck, again, I'm doing almost absolutely nothing outstanding with this deck. The Devimon actually did matter and come in handy because I wasn't drawing. So if I faced in the mirror, then I'm not playing into the opponent's ability. And then against yellow decks and certain other decks, the DP actually did matter. So DP does matter as of right now, and that's why I'm also kind of running like the BT11 mock is, again, DP matters. Having blocker allows me to have some defensive play if I'm able to actually use it. And then my like spicy tech card outside of Full Metal Blaze is the BT4 Mirage, which the person who did play Mirage in top 16 did end up using the same card, because I was having success with it in previous events and they might have taken notes. But we care mostly about the fact that it unblockable is pretty decent, so we don't need to run the BT13 because that's not relevant right now. Later it will be. And then we also care about the name and the cheap evolution. So it allows you to not miss timing with BT11 and get that unsuspend for when you go into burst mode. So it's a pretty solid card. I'm thinking about swapping it out for something like an Azulong Ace, just to kind of try something different. Because Azulong Ace, the bounce probably matters, and the Ace also probably matters. So just some other things that I'm thinking about. And then Betamon is also pretty good, again, because of jamming. So it's just a solid deck. That's all I can really say, is Mirage is a solid deck. So I know I kind of just talked everyone's ear out about this. So if you want to talk about your experience, Mark, you don't have to go as in depth, but you have the floor to mention what you want before we go.
I got you. I'll make it short and simple. But first, congratulations. 55th place is still very impressive, and it's crazy to think though that win could have got you top 16. That big of a differential in placement just off that one is so wide. Like, it just goes to show that even if you go like 6-1 or 5-2, you can still place high and low in the range that you could place in, and you could be placed in two different placements no matter your score. So even the placements are a little bit of RNG, if you want to say that, because they base it off of your opponent's win rates.
Yeah, which tournament software and all that stuff I will never understand. But it is just unfortunate. I basically just missed an opportunity at first try top 16 at regionals. But there's always more. Just would have been nice to not be extra sweaty. So
hey, you were close. So that just means next time you're gonna get even closer.
Yeah. So
but,
you have the floor to talk about your experience.
Okay, I placed 167th. I didn't do that hot this tournament. I did pretty medium. I guess I just go over what I went against, if I can remember them all. Round 1 was an all force. That was a very tough matchup, as he really got his tamer searches. He got good tamer searches. He got tamers out early, and he was really able to hard lock me out into a defensive position, and I couldn't really get aggressive for both games. Second, round 2 was actually Leomon, just like you. That was pretty even. It was a little bit more on his end. He got me good with a D-Digivolve where I had to get rid of his body. Otherwise, he would have killed me that round or that turn. But that in turn had to D-Digivolve me, and he was able to get rid of my stack. So, but it was a good match. Round 3 was against a Gamamon. That was a pretty good match too. I was able to get the triumph over him, get the stack out early, and keep his bodies out of board and in trash. Round four, I'm not really sure what round four was. I can't remember. Round five was a D Brigade deck or a Digi Police. That was a really good matchup. I won that. I was able to keep his bodies off the board as well pretty early, and just couldn't do much. Hitting with that new Megadramon and being able to kill Tamers that early, if you get the Marvin underneath, is really, really useful. That really helped me out both matches that game, or both games that match. Um, Round seven was a Numemon. Numemon, this probably was the worst match I had. It was just it's just so fast, it's so quick, but on top of that, how easy it can minus DP to a body, like how much it can do, is insane for how easy it is. I think one game, it was, I think turn his third turn, he had four bodies out, and he went into the Monze X, had got a fifth body out, and he was able to minus 3k from the Monze underneath that turn, and then the extra, I think, 10k. So he was able to kill my Chaos X, and I couldn't stop it because I couldn't get a EX1 machine under. So that matchup is really difficult for me. The more I played it that match, or that tournament. The next round was a bye. I didn't. My opponent never showed up, and then the last round we had was also another Numemon. Yeah, the last two actual games I played were both Numemons, and they were battles. That were just me being in a trench, just fighting for life, because it is a tough match to play. The more I played it a few times in practice, and I knew it was tough, but for some reason in the tournament, they were a lot worse than how it was during practice. So that's pretty much how my tournament went. I usually say that consistency was my biggest downfall for Machine Dramon, but I come to realize more that I'm trying to look outside the box of consistency. Is that just Machine Dramon's biggest issue that a lot of other decks don't have, and it's the build-up to their boss. A lot of major decks build-up is very quick. They get a lot of memory back for it. It's very cheap. They can get extra bodies out, stuff like that. Machine Dramon does not have that cheap of a build-up, unless you're running defense trainings, obviously. And all you have is Doramon, and some decks don't run Doramon. But Doramon's your only option for gaining a memory in your route to going to your level 6. And it's just not enough compared to most decks, and that in turn makes it so most decks get into their main strategy before you do, even though your strategy is definitely a lot more superior to them, or a lot stronger than their top end. So, but definitely the build-up was definitely the biggest issue I've seen this tournament that I need to focus on.
Yeah, because just thinking about Mirage, like, there were a couple of instances where my buildup was suboptimal, and you really can feel when, like, how important gaining memory is to be able to make the dumbest plays possible. And there were a couple of instances in my run where I didn't have any gain memory because the rookie was like jamming, and then the champion was plus 1,000 DP. So I'm just like, cool, what I need to gain the memory. They don't have enough cards in their hand for me to gain the memory and maintain turn. So like I do notice like the setup is hugely important, and I do kind of agree that Machine German, when you go up into him, he's not insanely scary, and then when like you said, the getting up into him is slightly more challenging because his setup is slightly suboptimal compared to a lot of other decks. But
Yeah, because if I'm going against any decks that, like Mirage is a good example, if they bounce, any decks that bounce, suspend, and then can swing into my body, those decks really hurt me, especially if I do not get a line in my hand and I can't raise in or go up the line in the breeding area. It really hurts because I have no other choice but to play with my bodies.
Yeah, and
Otherwise, to get draws and stuff, and then but Mirage will just bounce it, and I got to start all over, and how cost effective it is
yeah,
to
that's
do that.
and this is why like Pseudo Ace is just like such an absurdly stupidly good card, is because like against War Greymon, I just literally pick apart what's giving the protection, and that same game plan translates into something like a Machine Dramon matchup. So it's just the fact that the one card does so well into so many different matchups to try to pick apart their stack and make their Digimon less effective and easier for me to bounce on top of uh, potentially bouncing a Digimon himself, because I did use the card to bounce like other higher level Digimon that just were played for free. So it's just a really strong card. But yeah, the setups for this type of a format definitely matter, and the cheaper, faster, and easier your setups are, the higher your deck's efficiency is going to be, which means the better it could do overall. So I guess this is a good point to transition into, well, the data that we got from the
Yes,
two regionals.
yes,
So
very
let me
interesting data
swap
we got for both
screens.
of them.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be pretty interested to hear that it is a majority of two decks.
So
We
let's
have a few outliers.
Yeah, so let's start off with Raid and Trade. Raid and Trade is a European event. They were capped. I don't know if they're capped, but they had 128 players. It was 7 rounds, best of three with Swiss. Their top 16 archetype breakdown was 4 red hybrids, 4 Numemon, 2 Leviamon, 2 Lugamon, 1 Gallant, 1 Marcus hybrid, which is basically yellow hybrids, just using Marcus. Then you have 1 Divas and 1 Yellow Vaccine. So that's a pretty okay spread, considering half the results of this event were literally 2 decks, which you'll see again just a little bit differently with the core results. So going over top 16 more specifically, first place was Gallantmon, second place was Red Hybrid, third place was Leviamon, fourth place was Numemon, fifth place was Marcus Yellow Hybrid, sixth place was Numemon, seventh place was Numemon, eighth place was Numemon, ninth place was Red Hybrid, 10th place was Numemon, or Lugamon, my bad. 11th was Divas, 12th was Red Hybrids, 13th was Red Hybrids, 14th was Yellow Vaccine, 15th was Lugamon, and 16th was Levia X. So out of all of these lists, most of them are pretty much known, uh, but I'm going to be going over like two of the more interesting ones. So, or we're going to go over two of the more interesting ones. So the first one, obviously, is the one that everyone's talking about, and that's Gallantmon. So the fact that
Woo!
a Gallantmon deck won a top level event in this type of a meta is like actually kind of absurdly way out there. This deck on a lot of people's radars was so rogue that people just don't even consider it a deck anymore. And I was sitting there like before the event and like trying to contemplate, how do I beat the meta without knowing fully what the meta is? And actually, Gallantmon was one of the decks I was thinking about because of what it does. So I was afraid mostly of Numemon and Leviamon. And this is a red deck, so it has access to Crimson Blaze, which shuts out being able to play Digimon by effects. So it's like, okay, not only does it kill all of the small things, which Numemon is, Gallantmon also can increase the DP threshold to kill basically everything in the deck, and then it stops it from playing effects, so all of their on delete effects basically become useless, which is just really good. On top of this, for Leviamon, just shuts out again their overall game plan, which is really good. And then because Leviamon's purple, Galamon likes taking advantage of high trash counts, which both Numemon and Leviamon do. So I could see, based on the matchups and what the natural game plan is, Gallantmon wanting to do well, like, or Gallantmon being able to do well. Um, and they're just running a very streamlined, clean list. You got your Guilmon X to increase DP thresholds, kill off floodgates, Searcher Guilmon, Rush Guilmon, Warp Guilmon, and I'm just going to call him another Searcher Guilmon, but this one pluses DP as the off one, because DP isn't necessarily that important if everything's just dying. Uh, Then when it comes to the level 4s, you got your DP boosting Growlmon, which plays your Tocado for free, which is really important. And then the only other champion that they're running is the Black Growlmon from EX4, to be able to mill out cards and act as retrieval to be able to grab whatever you need out of your trash, which is super valuable at helping consistency. So it's weird that they were only running two, but it kind of makes sense. Their War Growlmon's level 5 of choice was the BT12 because it makes evolution cheaper and deletes stuff and gains you memory as an inheritable. And then you also have your EX3 War Growlmon, again, to be able to play out a Guilmon, mill, or play out Tocado. Just solid setup card. And then they're just running a menagerie of like level 6s between EX2 Magidramon, because of its on delete ability, acts as like some good insurance in case your Digimon does get deleted. Then you have Raid as like your primary Gallantmon, to pick apart the opponent's field. You have the BT13 as basically, oh, I don't have anything, you cleared my field, cool, here's an instant Mega. I think that's always just a good card. And then you have X Antibody acting as like a pseudo level 7, and your actual level 7 is just Crimson Mode. And then they have just the Tocados and boost and training cards. So it's a solid list overall. There's a couple of tweaks that I would personally make, but it worked for them, and I'm really happy to see it be able to top.
It is a well deserved win that has been needed for a while now. The deck has been a fan favorite for a lot, and when expected, or where people had hopes that it was going to win, it finally got one. So all you Gallantmon fans can rest assured it can win, and it has finally.
Yeah,
And
especially since we know
congratulations to
it's
the player.
Yeah, especially since we know it's going to be getting more support. With the scramble cards plus Guilmon, like, it actually sounds borderline cracked. And then we get a new Guilmon line in, like, what, BT17? And that's
Yeah,
looking to be really good. They're getting a new Magidramon Ace promo, which is one of the dumbest aces I've ever seen. Because, like, it's just a very solid card.
don't
So
don't remind me.
yeah, so the deck is getting some support. Whether it actually is going to have real legs, it probably feels like it's more of a specific meta type deck where it only works in certain metas and not others. So I feel like
Oh, I
where we are, this is a meta that Gallantmon actually can thrive in.
and I think a big note that people that don't know need to understand is that the deck is definitely not a autopilot. You have to be skillful with the deck. You cannot just autopilot it. It has to be played strategically. You have to know how to play the deck. Okay? And that player winning, he practiced a lot probably.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of decks that you just can't autopilot. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
because the power ceiling has become so much higher in the past couple of sets, so has the skill requirement in order to play them optimally. So, like, a
hmm
Leviamon, sure, you can know, like, a Leviamon combo or, like, know the setup, but there's a lot of, like, intricacies in its removal and its setups, and it's just not the easiest deck in the world to play. Most purple decks aren't, and Numamon's kind of in a similar fashion. Numamon is more autopilot because you're literally just looking for Numamon X, and then you don't care about anything else. And then you just time your Monzemon and you time your Monzemons and aggro with Numamons and just look for Numa X. Like, it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like it's that hard, but it still requires you to know what the opponent is doing so you can know how to play against it optimally.
I mean, you have to know like there's still, and I think this is naturally from the game being this far in like BT set wise, that the game has naturally gotten a little bit more intricate to the point where you can't autopilot as much as you could maybe back in like BT5, BT4 era. It
Well,
it's
that's like
definitely
all the
had a
way at
lot
the
more
beginning of
juice
the
at it.
game. Yeah, that's all the
Yeah,
way at the beginning of the game where the game was still trying to figure itself out.
exactly. And now we're at a state where most decks have some sort of thinking that is required.
Yeah, and speaking of thinking being required, One of the other raid and trade decks that I want to highlight is another deck I actually was talking with my team on in terms of something that I would consider bringing to an event if I was afraid of Numemon and Leviamon, and that is actually Divas. So Divas is a very interesting deck trying to utilize the ace mechanic to basically its fullest extent. You're just hard slamming level 5s and then waiting for the opponent to attack to ace, or you just digivolve and still kind of just ruin the opponent's game plan. So they're like it's a very solid deck, especially against Numemon. You want to try to set up your blockers with your black tools, and then if they attack, you just ace off of any of your level 5s, and you have some really good like anti-tempo tools and some halfway decent aggro tools. So like it's a solid deck into more aggro style decks. I know this playing red hybrids into this, it's a nightmare. It could actually be a nightmare. But into Leviamon more specifically, he has very specific types of abilities that this deck kind of dances around. So he wants to like play out and revive Digimon on your field, but because of the Mother Egg, it doesn't give Octomon the ability to do the token, and it also doesn't give any of the like level 5s like Dragomon or Warusidramon to be able to revive anything either, because everything's going to be at level 5 or higher. Uh, so it's kind of crazy just how much this kind of dances and dodges. And if they kill your level 6 Digimon with their level 6 Digimon, your on delete ability most likely will end up deleting their Digimon as well. So it's just like, cool, you could kill my thing, you could get the overflow, but your Digimon's dead as well. So did you really make that much progress? Probably not. So I think like it's just another really good anti-meta deck. But it does have like most decks, good matchups and bad matchups.
Yes, especially when, anything to do with having to hard play Digimon usually has a good amount of bad matchups. Because you're taking a big toll to get a big profit from it, just like Machine Dramon. You're paying a hefty price to go into your boss, but your boss is powerful, and this the same goes with Diva deck. You're paying all that memory to play level 5s, but your top end going into that quickly is going to be pretty decently strong.
Yeah, especially since they were playing Rune Mode as well, because Rune Mode could go
Yeah.
off of any of the aces because they're all either part yellow or part purple. So
I
it's
was
just
just
like,
seeing that, yeah.
yeah, so Rune Mode is just another really good anti-meta card, and the fact that like he also just deletes stuff means again more control on top of the recovery just allows you to be able to have some extra survivability for just a very easy card to use. So I think like this deck definitely was tuned to be able to handle Leviamon and Numemon, knowing that those are going to be two of the more prominent threats. And then again, you're not afraid of like some of the other aggro decks like red hybrids, because this just eats red hybrids alive most of the time because they don't have enough ability to remove your level 5s to stop you from going into your 6s. And it's just a really solid pick for this meta again. So I think like there is some really solid anti-meta picks going into this meta that players are figuring out and definitely took advantage of. So congratulations to all the people at Raid and Trade for getting into top 6. Um, but now we get to talk about core.
That and Telemon, by the way, is also a pretty nice card to have in there for aggressive. That, and it
Yeah,
also counts as a diva too.
yeah, because you want the different names, and Alliance on top of Recovery is just super nice.
Exactly. He's good if you're starting to lose some security and you can push aggression while recovering. It's very nice. I
Yeah, and
like it a
then
lot.
they're also on the Janai as well. And a
Yeah.
starter deck Black Tie from starter deck 15 is a good way to uh, keep your memory high so you're not giving them an exuberant amount if they're trying to choke you. So good deck, good result overall. Um,
Exactly.
and now Core. So this is the
Core
event both me and
TCG.
Mark participated in. This one was 8 rounds, and it was 336 players. And our top 16 was a little bit different. There's some commonalities, which we'll get into after we look at the data. So, in terms of the top 16 archetypes, there's 4 Numemons, 4 Leviamons, and then a lot of one-ofs. 1 Red Hybrid, 1 Lilith, 1 Greymon, 1 Lugamon, 1 Marcus Yellow Hybrid, 1 Mirage Gaugamon, 1 Yellow Vaccine, and 1 Beelzemon. So we could see between the two events that Numemon, Leviamon, Red Hybrid, Yellow Vaccine, Marcus, and Lugamon are all like reoccurring decks that were
Yeah.
good and are, spoiler, still good. In terms of the reoccurring ones, Leviamon wasn't really a deck until Levia X, and Numemon wasn't really a deck until Numa X, which is funny to think of. But and
It
then
is.
yeah, and then our top 16 breakdown. So that's the archetypes. So first place was actually Red Hybrids. Second place was Lilith, more specifically renamed Millith, because the deck just is a mill deck. Then we have War Greymon as the Greymon deck. They are focused on War Greymon, so they're trying to line up that OTK. Then you have Numemon in fourth. Then 3 Leviamon X's in a row from 5th through 7th. 8th was a Numemon. 9th was Lugamon. 10th was Leviamon X. 11th, another Numemon. 12th was Yellow Marcus Hybrid. 13th was Numemon. 14th was Mirage. 15th was the Yellow Vaccine that I lost to. 16th was Beelzemon. So, all in all, pretty decent. Between the two, there's a total of 12 different decks that were able to top in the meta so far. The consolidation is on Numemon, Leviamon, and Red Hybrid, looking to be the top 3 decks of the meta. I think that makes sense for, what the meta is, because Red Hybrids does pretty decent into Numemon. Numemon does pretty decent into basically everything, and same thing with Leviamon. And Red Hybrids can kind of dodge Leviamon, and plus it's a red deck, so it could play Crimson Blaze and try to stop a lot of other decks as well. So it's just a very good top 3 decks that I feel like are what's being represented here. But in terms of the interesting decks,
Yes,
uh,
yes, yes.
let's start with Millith, because we like Numemon and Leviamon are pretty well-known decks. I will say, out of all of the cores, they are all on Waru, so all of the decks are using Dragu Waru instead of trying to run a level 5 X antibody. So keep that in mind. The deck that I lost to, the Leviamon, was more on X antibody, and it was more OTK combo focused rather than control focused with Waru X, or with Waru. So that is something to note. But Millith, you could go ahead and give your thoughts on the Millith deck.
Yeah, the Millet deck is an interesting deck. Like you said, it primarily focuses on milling, but with this person's deck, it seems like they tried to take the more aggressive approach. Some cards to note is that they did use one ADR02 Searcher from the D Reaper deck, assuming to just get the draw from the on play, but also to proc for the effects that you need to delete one of your bodies to, for instance, the X3 Growlmon. When attacking by delete one of your other Digimon, this Digimon gains Security Tech +1. You can use that to proc that effect without, having to take part one of your Guilmons or level 4s or level 5s. They went with the Creepymon, which was also an interesting approach, seeing as the new, I forgot what set it's in. Help me out here. The
BT14
Ghoulmon.
Ghoulmon, yeah.
Yeah, he does pretty much the same thing, but he has the potential to mill more. But I think they went with the Creepymon for the ability to pop out a level 5 from trash, which is interesting because that means they probably were trying to go with the approach of popping out a level 5 and then going straight into a Lilith right away, and probably proccing more plays off that, and just all in one turn. and running the 2 Shine Gray rune modes on top of that to keep a little control on the board. And a whole lot of options. They used Alice McCoy's for the free evolutions. They were using Miss Memboost, Calling of Darkness, Glaive Memboost to get stuff from trash. Jack Raids is a staple for Lilith. For deletions, they were using Rivals Barrage. They were using some Death Slingers. And yeah, it's an interesting deck. Surprised to see it hit second. It has been quite a nice rogue deck, just like Galamon. But they had a few staples in here that I was quite surprised to see.
Yeah, I mean, if the idea is just to try to mill the opponent out, it's kind of just taking a lot of pages from OTK decks where it's just like you just need to know your combos and your setups, and then you're basically could be fine into almost anything as long as they just don't kill you before you mill them out. And the fact that against certain decks the mill actually could matter in terms of like actually ruining their game plan, because you could hit like one of their one ofs or both of their two ofs, or like you don't actually need to attack security, so their security is irrelevant. Like there's a lot of nuances to why Millith could still perform really, really well, on top of the fact that the Guilmon package actually is pretty good, considering Gallantmon also, spoiler, uses the Guilmon package. So maybe there's something to that little engine that is performing very well in this format. Because like there's just a lot of fun tech that this has, like the Guilmon EX4 Rush, like the rush ability off of that card. Yeah, I'm gonna mill both of us and then just Digivolve into Creepymon, play out Guilmon, Guilmon swings, Creepymon's gonna attack and swing even and mill even more. I think like the difference between Ghoulmon and Creepymon is Creepymon gives you the extra body to play with, so it's like I can Creepymon into a Guilmon or a Growlmon or a War Growlmon and then be able to Digivolve up and do something else. So like it gives you more opportunities to be able to have more combo play versus strictly just milling. And then obviously the mill options with Rivals being able to recycle basically anything, Black Growlmon being able to recycle your Guilmon engine, and then Deathslinger just giving you extra memory while being removal. Like it's just all very solid cards, and the deck seems to make sense in terms of like what it's doing, because it's pretty straightforward. And then what was the last deck we were going to be talking about for this event? Because all of these decks are pretty much well known. It's nice to see Beelzemon do well. I already talked about Galmon.
Yeah.
Lugamon he didn't really get a whole lot of changes. It's all about Black Automon Uber. That's like their big tech card to make that deck perform well. So I guess we could just do a yellow hybrid.
Yeah, to say the Marcus hybrid, I think, was probably the next interesting one, just because it's one we haven't seen, I don't think, in recent tournaments.
Yeah,
at least I'm not aware of.
It's basically, if anyone's unfamiliar with yellow hybrid, it is basically just a tamer focused deck that just uses your tamers as the point of aggression. So Marcus being a tamer that basically makes himself online without doing anything, kind of just makes sense for yellow hybrids to adopt, considering yellow hybrids kind of has been lacking some tools, but the fact that it's also two colors, red and yellow, lets you also run red options. So now you could kind of play like this yellow hybrid rookie rush security control like combo pack. And then you get like Ukamon as like an absolutely busted card to be able to turbo out your raising area, because you're not digivolving into your level 4s too often, because you know that's what your tamers are for, because your level 4s are mostly hybrids. Then you got a couple of aces and just whatever level 6s you feel like you want to run. The new level 6 being Quantumon is actually pretty good at disrupting the opponent and having just a sticky body that they can't deal with, which is why they were using Venusmon before, and well, they're still using Venusmon now. So, and then you just have a good, well-rounded level 7 suite.
That level 6 Quantumon, man, the first time I went against that, it is quite a disruptor. Like, you think it's not, because if you just read it, you think, oh, it guarantees one proc the first time, but then, like...
It's not hard to guess.
After that, it's kind of guessing, but you gotta think most decks are mainly Digimon, so almost every time they get that pick right, and then you just can't get rid of it. It's such a good disruptor that I'm just like, damn. I see it come out, and I'm like, okay, I ain't getting rid of that, so I'm just gonna go aggression.
Right, and the removal ability on her is also like really strong at being able to clear bodies, which is something yellow hybrids hasn't really been able to capitalize on, which is why they run removal options. But right now, removal options are really strong. Like, if you think about all of the protections that are in the game, like the majority of the good ones are still weak to removal options. So, like, just the
Yeah.
stray security hit can still mess the opponent up, which is why certain red decks do well, is because they either are deleting security or ignoring the security options entirely. So it's like, oh, it makes sense, because that's what the War Growlmon player was doing. He was using the Yuya to ignore options. So it's just like, okay, I don't need to run a delicate plan. Red Hybrids has it built in as well, so it's like, oh, that makes sense. Gallantmon just trashes security, so doesn't care. So you can see why certain red decks are doing well, especially into these more option control heavy decks.
Yeah, and speaking of options, that's a good topic. Is it like I feel like the number one most reliable way to get rid of a body is still DP reduction, and seeing Heaven's Judgment in so many decks now just goes to show what I said a few podcasts ago, that I said Heaven's Judgment was going to be a problematic card, and I think it's getting close because it can proc so much DP reduction, and not many decks can protect itself from DP reduction. My deck Machine Dramon can, but it's still a 50-50, you know? And DP reduction can be such a killer because you just can't, even the most newest form of protection, that's if it leaves the battle area, that usually protects against everything. It does not protect against DP reduction.
Yeah, and the raid and trade list is taking a lot of similar notes. They're just playing a couple of different cards, but the idea is all the same, where it's just like big removal options, annoying recovery install, and Marcus and Agumon low end to just try to push for damage. So pretty fun and spicy deck. It's something we've seen before, but not very often. And I think both decks are pretty decent in terms of like the depth and the tech ability that you have to be able to run to try to counteract what the meta is asking of you. And having just that level of depth is part of the fun in terms of like figuring out what your matchups are, what you're most likely to see, and what you're best off using with the tools that you have available. Good games to all of the core TCG top top 16, and again, good games to all of the raid and trade Europe top 16. So with that being said, this is the part where we got to think. We know some initial data. We know what people are playing, what's winning, at least at the start. So where does the meta go from here? That's the next big question to kind of round things out and start wrapping things up with. So obviously it seems like Red Hybrid, Numemon, and Leviamon are the big three decks of this format.
Yep. Yeah.
So going into the future, those are probably the three decks you're going to want to try to prepare the most against.
It's interesting you say that, because I will say one thing, and I told this to you during our tournament, is that even when you prepare for the top three decks, you can sometimes play a tournament where you just don't go against any of them. It the top end for these results seems very similar usually every time until a new set comes out and the meta completely changes. But still, it seems like our tournaments are pretty well diverse. I gotta say, because like that tournament, I didn't go against a single Leviathan. I didn't go against a red hybrid. I only went in against two Numes. everything else, I went against a few decks I was surprised to see, like All Force. I didn't expect to see him there. Um, I will say that on the note, I am happy that the tournaments itself are still being very diverse.
Yeah, I mean, I faced a lot of green, which is something I was kind of surprised at because I faced one Bloom and two Leomons, and then I only saw two Leviamons myself. But this is where like figuring out very smart tech cards is probably like to your deck's benefit. So I've already mentioned before, Full Metal Blaze is like one of the best cards that Blue has right now, and I firmly stand by that because in my yellow hybrids match, or not yellow vaccine matchup, uh Full Metal Blaze absolutely wrecked the Mitama play that they had set up. And if that wasn't a card that I was running, that match could have turned out very differently and I could have lost even sooner. So I'm just like, oh, uh, that's why I say like removal options are still important, but like also smart removal options because I used Full Metal Blaze as a good counter to just a lot of decks. Because Numemon, all the Numemons are level 4. Sure, the Monzimons are unaffected, but uh, Platinum, that's a level 6 they want on the field and they could recur. So if I could bottom deck that with Full Metal
Oh yeah.
Blaze, that's
Hmm.
important. That's insane. Especially like in Leviamon. If I could just use it to bottom deck Leviamon, again, insanely important. Even though it doesn't hit a whole lot of their level 4s because they're not leaving any out, just the fact that it has that coverage on wide board removal on top of big body spot removal, it's just an absolutely very smart card to want to run. Not trying to toot my own horn here, but like those are the types of cards that you need to think of where it's just like even though the meta is wide, there's decks fall into their own category and you need to figure out what cards counter what category.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm reading the card now to because I actually didn't know what it did.
Yeah. It bounces two
And
level 4s and then bottom decks a level 6 or higher if they have more than 8 cards, which ideally you're just bouncing cards into their hands before the bottom deck, so they should be able to have 8 cards in their hand if they don't already.
we're in a game state now where most decks are drawing 2 to 4 cards at least every turn.
Yeah.
Most decks are. So you're guaranteed always going to hit that secondary effect.
Yeah, but that's why like Crimson Blaze and Red is like still important. It was important before in like BT14 EX 5, but like it's still important now just because a lot of decks still are playing bodies for free, flooding the field, and that card just shuts it all down and makes itself like the crazy thing is it makes itself cheaper. Like I'm not saying the card is like overtuned because it's almost zero play when it was released in BT8, and it saw zero play basically until now because now it's actually becoming a problem. How much decks can do for so little, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, because we got into a meta where it's just important now.
Yeah, that's why a lot of
Yeah.
like the yellow decks are running Revelation of Light, even though most of the Karis are very suboptimal, which is why like I had to give the yellow vaccine player I lost to kudos for using Purple Kari because Purple Kari was just such a smart tech card. Because if he's not using it during his turn to make his cards cheaper, he could use it to tax the opponent to slow them down, which is something like in yellow people don't value as much as they should, especially since yellow doesn't have the highest damage output. So that's like why Mitamamon was so huge, is to be able to flood the field really quickly. Gatomon comes out of security. Like it was just a very well crafted deck. I think like the double aces is a little much. I'm not a huge fan of double aces myself, but like after seeing how they use the Kari to be able to play 2 aces to wipe basically any Digimon they want on the field out, I was it was crazy. I was just like, what the heck? And then the survivability of yellow is also pretty high too. But like Purple Kari is just a smart tech card that player decided to run, and obviously it did very well for them.
You're talking about the purple card, right? That gains of memory when a security is removed.
Yeah, because it's an all turns ability. So like,
I that card is I knew was going to be such a good tech card because of all the yellow cards that come out where they search security and pull some out. That counts for that card, and a lot of the main yellow cards do that effect. And I saw that card being used eventually.
yeah, plus like Revelation of Light cares about a Kari, and that's just literally one of the best Karis. Even though she doesn't have like any other abilities, just the one ability she has is like so good. That's that's what makes it a very good and smart tech card. And I think like we're seeing a couple of decks pop up just from this event. So like Lucamon, still good. OTK deck can hose on specific decks that want to rely on trash because of Blackout on Uber. Uber is the key card that's making the deck be able to be successful. On top of the fact that it's dipping a little bit more into red and it could run a delicate plan on top of still being purple. So it makes sense why that deck is doing well. So Lugamon's definitely a deck that we want to look out for. Yellow Vaccines has just a ton of different top ends and a ton of different combinations that you don't really know what to expect outside of literally TK Patamon. That's pretty much the heart of it. So it's like outside of that, you just don't actually know what they're going to be doing, if they're going to be more controlling or more aggressive. So it's hard
Yeah,
to,
exactly.
but that flexibility allows it to be able to cover a lot of bases to do well. So that's another deck we saw between the two events. We saw Yellow Hybrid, basically the better version of security control in my perspective. It's the version of security control that actually wants to win the game. So like if I were to play that type of a deck, Yellow Hybrids would be the one that I would play. Leviamon also kind of takes pages from it, where it's just like big removal options, hopefully out of security, and then it just has a big overtuned combos and cards to be able to just wreck shop. Uh,
Yeah.
then what were some other decks that we saw multiple between the two events outside of the big three? Uh,
Um.
I think those were it. Because we had Numamon, Leviamon, Red Hybrids, Lucamon, Yellow
Yeah, because
Vaccine, and
core, the only interesting one that we didn't see another one was Basilmon and Mirage, I think, and
yeah,
Mega
there
Cyber.
was more diversity in our top 16 because there was just more one ofs. So like
Did we have a Greymon in the
no,
raid and trade?
it was Devos.
Okay, there was no Greymon in raid and trade. Gotcha.
No.
I couldn't remember.
So like these early decks, a lot of people are gonna look at, not necessarily imitate, but take a lot of notes and pages, and like that. This is gonna be the foundation for our meta.
Yeah, I guess a question for that to shoot at you is, what decks do you think might come to fruition with the confirmed meta now with the results we have? What new decks do you think might start popping up that people will think about playing as a good tech against the top three?
Um, that's pretty hard because I feel like between the top three, because I Numemon, while it is an aggro deck, it's also kind of mid rangey because the top end is just so controlling, but the bottom end is just so floody. It's like absolutely insane and kind of crazy. But like I said, when I was looking at Leviamon and Numemon to try to counter, I was looking at other red decks and Fanglong. And then I also think like right now, blue is a really strong contender just because Zudo Ace is just such an absurdly good card. So like one deck that I
Mm-hmm.
honestly was thinking about taking to this event was blue hybrid. Um
Yes, yes, yes.
like people are going to write off blue hybrid, but I feel like blue hybrid, even though it has slower ways on playing its tamers, I feel like just the idea of bounce control is super good, especially against a lot of decks with a lot of good on delete effects. So like we still see right now just a lot of green floating around, not necessarily because of the green events, but like there's just a lot of decks that just want their Digimon to be deleted or gain benefits for it, and blue just shuts that down completely. It's just like, no, I'm gonna bounce it, put it to the bottom of the deck, do whatever. Like Great Maelstrom for blue Blue Hybrid seems like a really strong card, especially with Gomamon and Zudo being able to pick the inheritables apart to be able to do whatever it wants to do. Then you have some good. You could use Ukamon, the Floodgates. You have other source stripping stuff, which the protoform can be stripped from the source. So that's also something relevant.
Yeah, because normal X anybody can't, right? But the protoform can.
Yeah, and we saw in Ultimate Cup that Gabubond did well, and Gabubond is another deck that just wants to bounce a whole lot of Digimon. Uh,
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah, because it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna Ukomon, move out, gain a memory, set up for my Gabumon, so that way I could mat Gabumon, gain like 2 memory, have 3 memory to bond, and start bouncing level 5 and lower Digimon, which can mess up a lot of decks because there's still a lot of decks that can sit on their level 5s. Um, and then you have the new Melga, which can warp off of Gabumons if they have a Mega on their field. So it's like, oh, there's still a lot of viability in what uh, blue decks can do in terms of like the different approaches. I don't know if we're gonna see any like craziness with what's his face, uh, Imperial, because Imperial also is kind of part green, so it can't take full advantage of blue. But maybe something could be done there. I don't think Magnemon's ready yet. You can, but the deck kind of just struggles in the DP department, and DP matters. Like, this is the start where DP kind of starting to matter. So the fact that Magna can't really DP boost himself to be able to protect you kind of makes Magna X like not that great of a card, at least right now. Obviously later he's going to be cracked, but um I'm surprised
Yeah.
that the biggest shocker to me was there was no double Typhoon. Like, maybe a couple of double Typhoon cards, but literally the double Typhoon Terriermon deck did not make it into top 16, which shocked me because that was what I would have picked as the third scariest deck, because that deck has a lot of flexibility, and even though you're kind of missing that second level 6, there's ways to be able to make up for what it's missing right now to be able to still have a very impactful deck.
Yeah, you could always. I mean, second level 6 wise, you could always just throw in the old Mega Gargamon, which
Yeah,
is
or
a
even
really
Black
good
Mega
Mega
Gargamon.
Gargamon.
Yeah, or even Black Mega Gargamon. Like,
That
there's
card. I was
yeah.
thinking about that one actually.
So like my spicy tech when I was like fiddling around with the deck for this format specifically was the Warp Henry play into EX2 Mega Gargamon. Even like yeah,
Okay.
that was my spiciness. Um but I didn't really feel comfortable or confident with it, so that's why I just didn't even bother taking it. And I think I made the right call on not taking it, because right now Leviamon kind of just dumpsters to the deck, and again, that's where like these 3 core gatekeepers are coming from between Red Hybrids, Numemon, and Leviamon. Like, if you don't have a good matchup in at least like 2 of those 3 decks, then you're probably gonna have a slightly rough time.
Yeah, which is interesting to say because I don't know why I would have played Machine Drum then because I have a terrible time with both Nume and Levia.
I mean, you
Um,
have a good Red Hybrid matchup.
you would think I've actually had bad luck the last few tournaments I've played in. I don't know. They like the opponents I've played have never haven't used Ukamon. And more I look back on their decks, I think one did, but he never even really used it in our games. But they're just so fast. I don't know what I think it might be because the drop count on the analog mans is what has made it a little bit harder for me to win that matchup. Because a
Yeah,
lot
less
of times when I win that
redirects.
matchup is analogs getting hit in security, and then I'm just like, okay, I'll stop that turn, play another analog. All right, now you're just locked out. So I think I've made the matchup harder for me because of my ratio drop.
Yeah.
But it's interesting with the blue hybrid. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that deck as a deck I think we might see soon enough.
It just takes a
Because
good
like you
list.
said,
That's
Zudo
it.
is just so good.
Yeah,
Zudo's so good because you can pick the source. I don't think people understand how good that is because, like, take for instance my matchup. Zuda can straight up just get rid of. If I'm in Chaos X, he can get rid of the level sixes right underneath, get rid of the protections. Uh, if this is where it gets crazy because he can pick. If he doesn't feel like getting rid of my body and he just wants to go for game, guess what? He can get rid of the blocker inheritable I have. Then I can't block. That's one block I don't have, and it's just so good that blue has been a tough matchup for me because not only of Zudo Ace but also Mirage too. Mirage, it has such good bounce effect that bouncing decks are really hard for me right now.
yeah. Not to mention Dianamon's just like a really, really strong card in of herself because she's basically like a walking Sorai, which
Yeah,
against decks that want to play things for free, rush, go wide, like that could really screw things up too.
and you got your Tommy back too now. Uh, People
Yeah,
don't remember that Tommy got unlimited,
yeah.
so
I
now
mean,
Blue Hybrid can run 4 now,
the
which is good.
problem with Blue Hybrid is it is kind of slow on setting and playing its tamers up, but it's not impossible. So like I said, I think like just like some of the decks that we just saw, it really does take a very refined list. It does take a little bit of luck on the matchups and just understanding the meta in order to take something that people are discrediting or writing off and be able to do well with it. Because I think people right now kind of are just dropping divas, and I think that's honestly just a really good deck. Zulong is such an absurdly stupid card. But it also just has a lot of other really strong aces. All of the sovereigns are just really decent aces in of their own rights. It has like the toolboxiness to be able to be aggressive or controlling. You could even just straight up try to go turbo Fanglong just to be able to try to put Fanglong pressure on the opponent. Like I think we're just in a era where it does take a really good meta read in terms of the tech choices to be able to do well, but understanding where the meta is allows you to be able to make those tech choices. So I think like each color has like a deck that has the potential to be able to do well. And obviously, we already have 12 decks that are doing well. I'm not saying everyone's going to have Millith success or Beelzemon success, but the fact that still kind of anything is possible really is nice knowing that obviously our meta is far from solved, but knowing that we still can have a wide, diverse amount of decks that are, actually playable. Versus some other games where it's like, oh, you only get these 5 decks and that's it. Like, these are the only 5 decks that matter, and if you're not playing these, then you're already like wrong. You're making the wrong choice and wrong decision.
Yeah.
I know Yu-Gi-Oh as an example is like the notorious game that always manages to find itself to be in a tier 0 format. One Piece unfortunately was kind of in that same boat where it's just like, yeah, you play Sakazuki or you're not actually playing the game because this is objectively one of the best decks. I know One Piece there's more nuance to it, but it looked really bad seeing like their worlds be all Sakazukis and then they have to come out and say, we're banning the card that everyone is playing and the card that's enabling the deck to, be as good as it is. And I'm just like, Digimon doesn't really have a whole lot of that. Like Apocally and Anubis was kind of that, but that was just so short lived, and they proactively did it for us in the English format that I don't even care that we're not playing those decks. I honestly don't. If this is the result of that, and we actually have a pretty diverse format outside of the known 3 decks right now, like, fine. Okay.
Yeah, this chart on the Eggman website could definitely be like half of it is just Apocalypse, another quarter of it is Anubis, and then the rest are miscellaneous. Like it could have been a way worse format.
I mean,
And
even just looking at like the pre limitations, Apocalypse already was taking over. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Apocalypse and Anubis were just taking over.
yeah,
So
they could have seen a big drop in player base for the card game just for a set or two if that didn't get hit.
yeah,
Guaranteed. No, that's not even an opinion. That's a fact. A lot of people would have stopped playing.
yeah. So I think we're still in a good spot. for where our meta is and how it can develop. I just hope we continue to see like all of these diverse decks be able to do well. And even though we do know like what are some of the more objectively stronger decks, uh, now is the time to start figuring out how to beat them, because other people are going to start wanting to jump onto the bandwagon if they already haven't.
I think few keynotes to say. Apart from the thing you said about success, is another thing to note is even look at the top three decks. Right now we're considered red hybrid, but the other two top three didn't. Those decks had probably tons of players, probably 25%, maybe even almost 35% of the players were probably between Levia and Nume, and a lot of them did not top in the top 16. Um, Probably a lot didn't even top at all. You know, it just goes to show that success is not guaranteed just because you play a top three deck. A lot of it is not only player skill, but also RNG, and that's a keynote that Digimon has a big part of is RNG. Everything's really RNG based. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
Red
but
Hybrid
there's
could
ways to
have.
mitigate RNG.
Oh yeah, and
Which
I'm
is
not
the
saying
skill
this in a
part,
bad
yeah.
way.
Which is the skill part and comes down to like creative deck building, because we've seen some of these Numemon decks, like not going too deep into them, but some of them are playing completely different low ends. Like some of them are playing red low ends, some of them are playing black low ends, some of them might even be playing purple low ends. Like it has like you just have to be the player to feel comfortable with how you're going to be teching your deck, whether it is a top three deck or not.
Yes, and I guess it's we're in a pretty good format. But I guess a good question to end this off, if we're about to end this soon, is:
Yeah.
do we feel like anything needs to get hit after this major ban list and limit list we just had, and really fix the meta? Do we feel like, even though that ban list has overshadowed it quite a bit, do we feel like anything else could have been hit or needs to be hit now, or do we think we're just below that point of needing to hit anything?
Uh, I wouldn't mind seeing Numemon X get hit. I wouldn't mind seeing Ukamon get hit, and obviously I wouldn't mind seeing the training cards get hit. But if the training cards get hit, that's gonna have some absolutely massive impact. So I think the training cards unfortunately aren't gonna get hit, which is really sad. Because especially since we also know they're gonna be getting reprinted in the next set of starter decks, the Liberator starter decks. So they're definitely not going to hit those, which is unfortunate because I do think those are some of the most problematic cards. But I think Ukamon right now is a huge offender, and I want to see something from
Yeah.
obviously Numemon, because Numemon is wrecking shop in Japan. It's wrecking shop here. It probably, out of all of the decks, it is the most represented deck, even before the Apocalypse ban and restriction list took place. It was still doing gangbusters then. So I honestly think like something from Numemon just really needs to go. And the only card that logically makes sense is Numemon X, because that's right now the only way that it's enabling the platinum plays. Otherwise, like, are you honestly gonna try digivolving into platinum? No. Are you kidding me? And then like it makes the
Yes,
no,
I'll
you're
do
not.
it for one.
I mean, if you have nothing better to do and you just need to try to cheaply climb into a level 7, sure. But like obviously the more optimal play is playing it for free than evoing for 1. And when you play it for free, you also are going to net 2 memory, so it's like whatever. Um
Yeah.
it's just an absurdly strong card, but Numemon X is what's enabling it. I don't mind seeing Protoform get hit just because I think certain decks right now are abusing Protoform, but I think Protoform's probably fine. Um,
I would say
I don't
yeah.
really mind.
I don't think protoform is a big deal. The
No,
training cards, I will say though, I wouldn't stake it too hard on them getting reprints to the fact that they won't get hit, because we've seen it before where a card got a nice alt art and it got hit. One good example is that Intmon that was released, I believe, in EX3. It released. We had the alt art, and then right after the alt art came, it got limited. So I I wouldn't say, trading cards can't be limited. Banned might be a stretch, but limited for sure can still happen.
Yeah, I don't think anything like hardcore needs to be banned. I think like right now, just having cards be like, it's astonishing that we're like 4 years in and we don't actually have any other banned cards. Everything's just been limited to one and everything's kind of just been working out that way. I don't think we need to go limited two or any like silly shenanigans because then it just becomes harder to keep track of. I do like the one and ban, but I think like right now, outside of Ukamon and Numemon X as like my two big cards, I think we're pretty fine, to be honest. Maybe something from Leviamon, just because I hate that deck. I think that deck is incredibly stupid. So maybe something from
That
it.
one's going to be a tough one to hit.
Yeah, the
I ain't
problem
gonna
is I
lie.
don't know what to hit in it. It's not
It's
like
a tough.
yeah, like maybe Biting Crush, but I think that would like literally cripple the
That
deck
would kill
into
the deck.
oblivion.
That would kill it.
Yeah, that
No.
that would cripple the deck into oblivion, which is something they don't want to do. So maybe it would be the Leviamon from EX,
Um,
but because we're getting
I
another
don't know.
Leviamon.
I guess it just all depends. But I will say Leviamon's a hard deck too. That's a discussion on its own, honestly.
Yeah,
That requires
it's
some research.
right. Like Numemon is a little bit easier because literally Numemon X is enabling the whole thing. Like Monzamon X is stupid. Sure, it's a really good card, but like without Numemon X giving that basic protection and threat possibility on just, hey, I'm either going to die, extend my play by playing a platinum, or give my higher stages protection because it's just going to play a platinum out anyway. Like, I think Numemon X is a lot easier of a card to just justify getting hit out of the Numemon deck. On top of Ukamon, because every deck can abuse Ukamon, and I think the card was incredibly poorly designed. This and the new one, I hate them both.
I think, and this was something I talked about with Ukamon, is it. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, and it technically does work that way, but it's a stretch to see that it can push out and activate its effect at the same time. And I compared it to also Yggdrasil because I remember when Yggdrasil released and its first few days of playing, we didn't think that you could hatch Yggdrasil and then activate its effect to do Yggdrasil again. But
Yeah,
that is technically how it works, and that's one. Those are two prime examples of like activating an effect while a card is coming out of raising is something that I just feel like shouldn't happen. I think that's what makes it a little too strong. Um, do I think Ukama would have been a lot more fair if it couldn't do it right when it comes out? I don't think so. I think it's still a super strong card, but it is a factor that would definitely hurt it a little bit.
yeah. But outside of that, I honestly think everything is currently fine. Currently, things could obviously
Yeah,
change real quickly, but that
I
those are
think
the
it's
only.
good we don't have a lot of ban cards like you said because I think just it's hard to ban a card like or it's hard for a card to need to be banned like even a Pokemon for example like
No, Apocalypse
them
was an
limiting
easy
it.
ban. That was probably the easiest card they could limit to one ever. Like, it sucked, sure, but that was the easiest one next to Anubis. There was
Well, no,
nothing
yeah,
they
they
could have
limit it,
done.
but I'm saying
Yeah.
like it's hard to ban a card
Oh, they
because
could have easily banned it as
you
well.
you don't need to. That's the thing. Them limiting that card to one is practically banning it, but still allowing people to try and play it. They can still play the cards they want. It is just going to be really, really hard now, and limiting to one is almost practically a ban. I feel like just specifically in this card game. Maybe in other card games I'm not too familiar with, but maybe that's not as ineffective. But in this one, a limit to one is almost a ban.
Yeah, no, they're doing a pretty decent job at maintaining their ban and restriction list, and the fact that we don't have a whole lot of banned cards is a very good thing, especially compared to a lot of other games where they're banning cards left and right, um,
Yeah.
because their power creep is getting stupid. Not saying ours isn't getting stupid, but the fact that they're able to maintain it as well as they are, and the fact that right now BT15 is looking to be a pretty healthy format, definitely is a big plus for the current state of the game. But
Yes.
I think that's a good place to kind of wrap things up on. So at this time, I want to thank everyone for listening to the podcast. It really does mean a lot to us that you made it all the way to the end. And if you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, like I said earlier, please make sure to leave those ratings, likes, reviews, follows, subscribes on whatever platform. Make sure to share it with others on social media to be able to get it spread. And I want to thank you all again for listening, and we will see you next time.